To hear Maclean's, the Canadian Current Affairs magazine, tell it, the US has given Canada a whopping case of keeping up with the Joneses. In an article from a few years ago, Chris Sorensen bemoans the replacement of the defunct Sears Canada flagship store in downtown Toronto with a Nordstrom, the US retailer that, he points out, serves a decidedly higher end crowd. More Nordstrom stores and 3 Saks Fifth Avenue locations have opened in Canada since the article was written. Bryn Weingard, a Toronto based marketing consultant, says the shift stems from Canadians' growing preference for prestige shopping. The article continues. We've got so much stuff, we're paying others to hold it for us. Canada now boasts the biggest self-storage industry in the world outside the US. An achievement worthy of our very own Storage Wars Canada TV franchise. Its conspicuous consumption of the sort normally associated with free-spending Americans, not practical-minded Canadians, Sorensen tut-tuts. And it's not being fueled by growing paychecks so much as by maxed out credit cards. I've never seen an episode of Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, but according to the Internet Movie Database, which also covers TV, this program spotlighted the eccentricities and excesses of a different member of the rich and famous every week. Special attention was always given to the prices paid for the various luxuries with which the upper crust enhanced their daily lives, ranging from spacious seaside villas to classic cars to gold-plated bathroom fixtures. As much as TV shows like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous disgust us with their excess and conspicuous consumption, they draw us into aspirational lifestyles beyond our means. Lifestyles of the rich and shameless is more like it. Scholars speculate that the church in Corinth may have experienced a similar dynamic. It appears that the social life of the upper class in Corinth revolved around frequent feasts, banquets, and celebrations, observes Bruce Rigdon. Well-off, educated members of the newly formed church had no qualms about eating offerings left for idols because they knew these idols didn't exist. Paul writes to remind them that even though their reasoning is correct, some who are led to partake of the offerings by their example might be drawn back into the practice of worshiping these idols they had so recently abandoned for the Christian faith. To quote one of my favorite sayings, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just because you know that you will come to no harm by eating the food offered to idols doesn't mean you should eat it, because you might cause someone in your community spiritual distress. I don't know about Anacortes, but in Seattle, jaywalking is a misdemeanor. You can actually be ticketed by a police officer for disobeying pedestrian traffic laws. In spite of this, I have to confess, I have been known to jaywalk, to cross a street against the light if no cars are in sight, to cut across the street mid-block to reach my destination if it's a particularly nasty, windy day. I've never been ticketed, and I rationalize to myself that my behavior is harmless because I'm extra careful. However, When Griffin was young and we were walking somewhere together, I never jaywalked. Children aren't able to judge when it is safe to cross the street without the help of cues like traffic signals. And I didn't want Griffin to get the idea that it was safe to ignore them. Walk with the man, not with the hand, we used to say as we waited for the walk signal at an intersection. We've all been exposed to the arrogance of people who know what is right and what is wrong, what is pure and what is sinful, what is truth and what is a mainstream media lie. Because they know what is permissible in the sight of God and the US Constitution, they are free to act any way they see fit, they think, no matter how it affects others. But the freedom afforded members of a democratic society is like the freedom afforded to members of a faith community. It's a freedom coupled with responsibility. That's why Paul urges the Corinthians and us to take care that this liberty of yours does not somehow become a stumbling block. We have seen people in our country insist on their freedom to do all sorts of ill-advised things. Bring guns and ammunition belts to protests, judge people with different sexual orientations and tell them they're condemned to hell, refuse to wear face masks to protect employees of airlines, restaurants, and grocery stores. We know their behaviors are selfish and wrong. And so, without even realizing it, we fall into the very pitfall that Paul warns about. It seems evident to most of us that the beliefs of right-wing extremists and QAnon conspiracists are simply flat out wrong, especially when those beliefs are debunked by scientists, professors, and documented evidence. Knowing reality from crackpot ideas and deliberate misinformation is important. It can also lead to arrogance that diminishes others and damages our connection with other people and with God. Knowing we are right does nothing to heal the painful divisions in our country. We can know all the facts, but lack the necessary knowledge to know and love God above all else and our neighbors as ourselves. The sin of arrogance, of knowing we are right and judging others to be wrong, separates us from God and others. Knowledge puffs up, inflates our sense of self, of ego. Love builds up the body of Christ, our communities, our country, our world. A lot is being written about how impossible it is to bridge the ideological divide between the right and left, or even lower the intensity of the hateful rhetoric. There are exceptions. This is something that many of us have experienced personally when we try to reach out to family members, friends, or social media contacts with efforts at reconciliation. It's important to remember that with God, all things, perhaps even national healing, are possible. This story from the Associated Press is one example. The inauguration of Joe Biden was just days away, and Natalie Abbas was feverishly searching for an 11th hour intervention that could prevent the swearing in. She sent a video to her friend and political sparring partner, Jim Carpenter. 5 miles across town, the local newspaper was on Carpenter's sofa, and the Washington Post was on his doorstep. When he clicked on Abbas's link, his jaw dropped and his white eyebrows shot up. This is nonsense, he said, shaking his head. He laughed so hard he bent at the belly and slapped his knee. It's really nonsense. Abbas and Carpenter are local ambassadors for a program designed to bridge the nation's extraordinary political divide, and the gulf between them is about as wide as one gets. Carpenter is a 73-year-old retired statistician who believes what dozens of courts have found: Biden is the rightful winner. Abbas, 59, says her conviction that the election was stolen from former President Donald Trump is as strong as her belief in God. Together, they ponder the greatest challenge facing Biden and American society. How can they find common ground if they no longer exist in the same reality? So Carpenter and Abbas decided to navigate one of the tensest weeks in American memory together as the former administration ended and Biden's began. People are getting threatened on both sides, Carpenter said. People are going berserk. It's crazy, Abbas replied. Carpenter nodded. He'd written himself a personal mission statement that to him seemed as true as any mathematical equation. Create a world of connection and respect by seeing the light in the eyes of others. Where is the light? Carpenter asked. I've got to find it somewhere. They're part of a national initiative called Braver Angels, inspired by a passage in President Lincoln's inaugural address of 1861, when he appealed to the better angels of our nature as the country was tearing itself apart. Abbas arrived to watch the inauguration in Carpenter's living room. In his address, Biden spoke of building a more perfect union. Unity. Unity. He said that word 8 times. He acknowledged some might call his pursuit a foolish fantasy. He conjured Lincoln and the same words that had inspired the Braver Angels program. He said our better